Hey friends, it's time for a day in the life of an ICU NP night version. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the night shift works at one of the places I work. And they're different. So there are differences in the places I work, and there are huge differences between what I do during the day and what I do during the night. Alright, so the place where I'm going tonight is a smaller hospital. There's 20-ish beds in the ICU there. It's a mixed bag. They have various different types of ICU patients. So it's usually a mixed bag. I'll have a little bit of neuro, I'll have a little bit of cardio, I'll have your regular medical stuff, and there is some surgical stuff there as well. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I get a little bit of everything. There's still a fair amount of COVID, which is becoming its own subspecialty. When I go there at night, since COVID hit, they're using 2 clinicians at night. It's usually a physician and an APP, but some nights it's just one APP. When you get to these smaller hospitals, I work in another hospital system where I sometimes float to a smaller hospital. The census waxes and wanes so much, it's really hard to get a good staffing model where you have a matrix that provides the right amount of providers for the patients that you have. So some nights you're gonna be in there and your census may only be 12, 13, and there are 2 of you and you're bored to tears and there's no admissions. And some nights you go in and there's 24 and even just one of them is sick as snot, and you spend all night trying to stabilize that one and you wish you had another person with you. So it varies wildly. You just never know what you're gonna get. There is a difference between the tasks that I have to accomplish on a day shift and a night shift. The function of what I do is the same. Our goals as a team, whether your days or nights, is to get your patient out of the ICU. That's always your goal. Your goal is to get your person better and get them out of the ICU, or to let them go if they're not gonna survive it. But your goal is always, what's the next step? What's the next step? That doesn't vary whether it's days or nights. The difference is that during the day, you're gonna have interdisciplinary rounds, which are gonna, depending on where you work, if it's an academic institution, could suck up a good chunk of your day. I have been in rounds that have lasted 4-5 hours. You have to stop and eat lunch and then finish. I don't prefer that kind of rounding because I feel like I can't get my work done. But even when you're in a place where rounds are very efficient, it's at least an hour. So during the day, you're gonna go in, you're gonna get your sign out, get your report on all the people in your service, and then you're gonna divvy up your workload. But usually most places work in teams, so it's gonna be like a doctor and an APP for a group of patients. No matter where I work, it's sort of always that way. So you're gonna divvy up your census, and then depending on where you work, some places that have more autonomy than others, we divvy up the patients evenly, and I have my own census and the physician has their own census, and while we round together on all the patients, in particular on mine, I have to make a plan of care with the physician. After that, I can kind of go do my own thing, manage the patient myself, do the family talks myself. Another place I work, there's not that much autonomy, it's a lot more commingling, but your tasks for the day are to see your patients, round, make a plan, and then write your notes, which is a huge chunk of your day, people. I think I'm also going to start a series on note writing because it is a huge part of what we do and how we do it well. I would say if you work a 12-hour shift, you're probably going to spend several hours to as much as 6 hours of your day writing notes. And then you have procedures. Obviously, if you have decompensating patients, sometimes you can be in one room for several hours at a time. It just depends on what happens that day. And then you try and finish your notes as quickly as possible so that you can set yourself up to be open for admissions and consults later on in the day. And that's your day. At night, it's different. So the big hospital that I work at, there may be 2 whole teams, so like a physician and APP, 2 of those to cover all the territory, and we'll split up and do our own set of rounds within our region. And there we do formal rounds at night. It's very different than academic rounds during the day. It's not interdisciplinary rounds. This is, we're gonna go around and make sure that the patients are stable, that any tasks that were left undone by the day shift get done, including procedures, following up on labs. You know, if we need to make a decision about proning someone or there's a family that's coming in, you know, we go through and very kind of briefly look at all the patients, look through the pertinent things, ask the nurses if they have any immediate needs, and then we'll go about accomplishing those tasks. So if I have a couple of lines to do, I'll then go do the lines, talk with any families. A lot of times families show up at night. You're going to hear different things based on the culture where you work in regards to what the role of the night shift team is. I have heard a lot, people will say the night shift's job is to put out fires. It is not to change the plan of care that was established during the day. And while part of me kind of agrees with that, so because the day shift spends all this time going through it and making the plan, if you come in at night and make a completely opposite decision and start instituting that, and then the day shift comes in the next day and undoes it, you're like working against each other, and it's not for the good of the patient. So yes, in some regards, if that's kind of the way you operate, that can be sort of detrimental to the patient. But when things change minute to minute in the ICU, often I will call families in the morning and say your family member is stable, they're fine, and then 6 hours later they're crashing. So you have to roll with the punches, and if the patient is telling you that the plan of care needs to change, you change the plan of care, whether it's day or night. It doesn't matter. I just don't think it's super respectful to say to a night shift team, don't change the plan of care from what we did during the day. Your job is to put out fires. No, it's not. They are highly capable and in many ways more adept at handling acute issues, and many more of them with less resources. So in some respects, I find that a little bit derogatory, but I get it. I do get it. Night shift is going to be a series of phone calls, nurses and bedside staff calling you for problems that you're going to have to address. The reason you don't get just as many during the day as you do at night is because you're covering a lot more people. During the day, I may only take phone calls on 6 or 7 patients. At night, I could be taking phone calls on 30 patients. Night shift people have to be very adept at making decisions on the fly and working with a significantly fewer amount of resources. If you work in a very small shop, get to be very good friends with your ER team. Get to know your ER APPs and doctors, because they will save your booty when things hit the fan. The other thing that makes nights challenging is simply the fact that your body is supposed to be asleep and your brain knows this. There are very few people in the world who truly have flipped circadian rhythms. Most people struggle from 3 to 5 a.m. a lot. In the role that I'm in, I know a lot of people who sleep during that time frame. Physicians, APPs, it's sort of the lull in the night too. There's less tasks, there's less going on. A lot of people will take that opportunity to take a nap and then wake up kind of refreshed, and then they can continue doing this for days on end. I personally cannot sleep in the hospital. I can't sleep on a good day at home. So I certainly am not going to sleep in the hospital. That's the time in which I choose to take a lot of journeys around the hospital. I walk a lot, just walk around a lot, talk to anybody that you see, whatever you can to keep yourself moving and alert. So for me, I have to stay awake the whole night. If you're the kind of person who can wake up from a dead sleep and be sharp on the uptake, that's cool. But you've got to be able to very quickly be on it, because emergencies happen day and night all the time, almost every single day I go to work. And this is truly a matter of life and death. I think this is why residents train the way that they do. I was a young whippersnapper, and hours for residency training was not capped. They were at that hospital like 80, 120 hours a week, a lot. They slept there a lot. They took a ton of call. And I think there's a reason for this. As a person who's responsible for another human being's life in a critical moment like that, they've got to get very good at rapidly waking the brain up and making decisions even when the brain is tired. And at 4 a.m, when the synapses just aren't quite firing as fast as they should, you've got to have that knowledge deeply embedded in the brain so you can just regurgitate it out. It can truly change the course of whether or not a patient lives or dies. So you need to do what you can to get your brain in that state of mind. If you're the kind of person who can wake up from a dead sleep and do that, you're cool. Rest when you can, take the rest. I'm not the kind of person who can do that. I got to stay up and awake and alert. So I do what I can to keep my body going and my brain going all night long. That's what works for me. So I have thus far been at work for 3 hours. I took sign out on all the people. I'm working with a physician tonight. Woo woo, so I got help. That is an appropriate level of staffing for the amount of patients that we have, but it's always nice to have a backup. Some of you will probably go to work in ICUs where it's just you, and there may be a physician on call, and you will get more competent with this in time. I would not suggest that fresh out the gate for somebody who's a new grad. So thus far I have done 1 admission, and let's see, I have 3 patients with hypotension that I've had to sort through the differentials for why they're hypotensive, and it requires a little bit of time and effort. One of them, I'm gonna get something called a flow track to help me differentiate whether or not I think this is cardiogenic versus hypovolemic. Doesn't look profoundly septic. So anyways, that's one way that I kind of filter out my differentials and know how to treat the real problem that I have and not just guess. And then I made rounds with the physician. We went very briefly from room to room, asked the nurse if they needed anything, looked in the room on our patients, went in and evaluated some of them, treated any current problems that we're having. I have 1 procedure I probably need to do at some point tonight, but I'm having to hold some anticoagulation for a little while. So those are typical night shift chores that you do. Do you have any questions I can answer for you? Okay, now this is not dialysis, okay? Okay. I think I'll just stop all the fluids then. The H&H? No, I didn't look at it. Let me get back. Hey, it's Brianna. 2:45. Still hanging in there. I've been just steadily busy enough with procedures and things going on. Taking care of the acutely decompensating and keeping them going. Nice and steady, which is the way a good night shift should be. So it's about 4:30. I'm hanging in there very nicely because I slept in this morning. So I feel okay right now, but usually between 4, 5 in the morning is when I like to walk around the hospital. Stairs are good because they kind of get the blood pumping and the breath moving and the heart pumping as well, and wakes you right up. I also talk to anybody I come across, and that keeps you awake. There's just usually enough going on each night to keep me steady enough to get through to the morning. I don't want to do night shift full time. I certainly wouldn't want to do more than 2 in a row, because after that you're exhausted. Because if you're like me, I do not sleep during the day. I can sleep about 4 hours and that's it. The cool thing about that is I can get a lot of things done because you're off during the day and you're not sleeping. So like this morning, I slept till 8:30ish and then had a full day. Hiked, did stuff for my kids, did a grocery run, accomplished some things before I come to work. And here I'm at work while the rest of the family's sleeping. I'll go home and sleep for about 4 hours, and I'll be tired tomorrow, but I'll power through. So I like doing a day here or there, or even 2, but I don't like to do a whole lot more than that. So you'll notice I'm wearing my fuzzy coat and my hair is down. That's how I like to be, especially at night. They keep it freezing in here so people will stay awake. But when I'm on the unit, or if I'm in a patient room for sure, I'm wearing all the full PPE, just FYI. Been trying to log on to this EMR for a solid 2 minutes now. Frustrated with why it won't let me in. Uppercase, lowercase, did I spell it wrong? Do I have the caps lock on? Why won't it let me log in? Well, turns out, if you use your password from your other job, it doesn't work at this one. Occupational hazard number 101 when you have more than one job. One of the nice things about being an NP is that I'm not quite tethered to the IC rooms like I was as a bedside nurse. So I can roam the hallways at night to stretch my legs when things are slow, if they're slow. 5 a.m. That's the time when everybody's labs are coming back and you're getting really tired. So you gotta dig down deep to muster the energy to care too much about a potassium of 3.8. I got a COVID patient that we need to prone, so I'm gonna put on my gear and walk by the room, make sure everything's good to go.
quite often these people desat, so I want to be readily available at the bedside. Then I'm going to make a quick set of rounds on everybody, make sure nothing's needed, and update all of my stats, my drips, my vent settings, all of these things, so that I have the proper updated information to give day shift when they come in about 2 hours. Shift is over. I made it.
So overall, that was a perfectly paced night. I had just enough procedures. I had an art line, I had a vas cath, I had a couple patients I needed to stabilize because they were not doing well, mostly from a hypotensive standpoint. One had a rapid heart rate. A lot of things I needed to follow up on throughout the night, labs that came back that were abnormal. I only ended up having 1 admission and no consults, so that was kind of on the slower side. It was also kind of nice that I had a physician working with me, so I had some backup, although, you know, I didn't see the physician for most of the night, but that's cool because I like to do my own thing. I know that they're there if I need them. I stayed busy enough that I didn't get super exhausted, and when I did get exhausted, I had a chance to walk around and stretch my legs out so I could keep powering through. So now I have the task of just settling all that down so I can go home and sleep during the day, which is abnormal. Good night, all.